Oh, hey, my inner circle. Just tidying up the bookshelf at long last. Now, you may think that things are a little tight. But I say it's just enough room for everything that we need. My writing is a lot like that as well. You see, I received a review recently, and it said that blue lights is very tight storytelling. And that may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I, for one, took that as a compliment. A compliment that means more to me than you may have realized, because purposefully, I don't waste words. And that didn't start with writing. It started with who I am as a person. And that is a quiet person. Not shy, not without words or without thought. Just quiet. Just aware. Aware of space. Aware of attention. Aware that when you speak, people are giving you something valuable. And that is their time. I've never really been one for talking just to talk. I remember being a young child and seeing the exhaustion that the attention needy mom calling kids gave to their parents and to everyone else around them. I didn't understand the exhaustion of listening to someone who talks circles and seems as though they have no point to get to, and even if they did have a point to get to, they're taking the longest route to get there. But sweet and polite, I listen and I make note not to waste people's time. So when I speak with a purpose. And when I write, I do something similar to that. Now, this wasn't always a thing for me. When I first started writing, I noticed that I was doing a lot of telling rather than experiencing. I had the characters do a lot of exposition through dialogue instead of having the reader live out these moments with the characters. So, when I was young, I started writing in 7th grade with a Twilight fan fiction. Anyways, and I think it was 9th grade when I looked at my pages that I was writing at some point. This was on another project, or on High School Host Club fan fiction. And I noticed that every page had dialogue on it. And I decided then that I needed to practice telling the story without having my characters tell the story. So I started challenging myself to write longer with less dialogue, to find ways to tell the reader things without necessarily telling them. And this kind of turned into a rhythm for me. This sense of environmental storytelling. And I got the hang of it kind of quickly, because it was something that was already instilled in me. It just had to transfer over into my writing. Now, When I got to college and started studying more short stories and more poetry, and had to write for the first time short stories, and not for the first time, but more intensely write poetry. This is when that instinct started to become... Sorry, I saw a bald head out my window and thought it was my brother. Anyways, this was when that instinct started to become more sharp. Because short stories don't give you any room to wander. Every scene has a purpose. It has a job to fulfill. And if that job is not being fulfilled, it gets cut. Poetry. Poetry taught me that every word carries weight. You learn very quickly that a single unnecessary line can blur the entire impact of the entire piece. I learned that every word needs to matter. I learned how white space matters. The things that you didn't say are just as important as the things that you did. And the readers, they're clever enough to figure that out. I learned that white space matters. Rhythm matters. Resistance matters. And I never unlearned that. So even when I write novels, longer works, I still write like space is limited. If a scene doesn't move the plot, it needs to deepen relationships. If it doesn't deepen relationships, it needs to build tension. And if it doesn't build tension, it needs to plant something for later. And if it's not doing any of that, it doesn't need to be there. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't let the story breathe. It does not mean that you can't have the soft chapters. It does not mean you cannot have fun moments to balance tension. You absolutely can. I do it all the time. In fact, when writing Black Lights, we hit a tension peak. How do I say without spoiling? Where emotions hit their highest points and where relationships stand on the very end of every cliff. And after reaching some resolution, I then write my favorite chapters to write in Black Lights, the sequel to my debut novel, Blue Lights, which were the 4th of July chapters. And in these chapters, it is a holiday. There is drum offs, crowds of people, music, food, and fireworks. There is fun. But woven in with that fun is a lot of meaning. New people are invited in. New types of relationships are built. Relationships are strengthened and tested. These chapters were, yes, fun for the characters and fun to write. But these chapters also were important for the structural point of the relationships between certain characters. These chapters built trust between characters that had no trust in each other prior to then. It deepened my themes of found family. And the story wouldn't have been the same without these chapters. It just wouldn't. I don't know why I'm worrying about spoilers. I'm like any of you read a book. What's that Raven Simone thing? Aren't I always working on albums nobody listens to? I'm joking. People read. You can read too. Anywho. The point is that even the fun chapters are still working. They're shifting dynamics. They're layering subtext. They're laying foundations. They're adjusting the emotional temperature of the space. They're never idle. Idle writing creates idle lead. Idle writing creates idle readers. Idle writing creates idle reading. And the moment a reader feels like they can start skimming means you've lost momentum. Momentum, it doesn't die in big dramatic ways. It dies in excess. I think sometimes writers confuse more with richer. But sometimes over sharpening only dulls the blade. Tight storytelling isn't about being short. Tight storytelling isn't about being short. Because I would still call Black Lights tight storytelling, and it more than doubled its predecessor. But what tight storytelling is doing is being intentional. It's about trusting that what matters most does not need padding. Let the story tell itself. It doesn't need a buffer. And it doesn't need filler. Even in chapter 4 of Blue Lights, the chapter that I shared with you in my last video, go check that out if you so desire to see some of my writing. Or hear some of my writing, I suppose. Anywho, the porch conversation. Technically, nothing explosive happens. It's just one conversation. But what happens inside that conversation is what really matters. Relationships deepen. Foreshadowing lands. Themes sharpen. And emotional stakes shift. All from just one conversation. Never do I tell the reader directly, hey, all these things are happening. But the reader knows. They can feel it, sense it, put context clues together to figure out that something important is happening here. And that something important is more than the words that are being said right now. It's reading and thinking through the quiet moments. And allowing for that blank space to be there. For the reader to use their intellect to fill in those blanks. Now, the plot doesn't sprint forward in this chapter. But the story does move. And movement is what keeps people turning the page. When people tell me, I couldn't put this down, what they're really saying is, you didn't give me any space to drift. And that comes from precision, from resistance, from making sure that every line has earned its place. Which is something that does not happen in draft 1. Let that be draft 2. Please just write draft 1. Don't worry about every word being the perfect word. You'll figure that out later. Just write draft 1, please. Anywho, I don't waste words because I don't believe that words are a casual thing. They shape attention. They shape the pacing. They shape emotion. And if I'm asking someone to sit with a story for hours, the least I can do is make sure I'm not wasting their time. And maybe that's really what it comes down to. Tight storytelling, it isn't about control. It's more about trust. Trusting that the moment is strong enough to stand without decoration. Trusting that silence can carry meaning. Trusting that readers don't need to be overwhelmed to be moved. I think a lot of us are afraid of being too quiet in writing. Afraid that if we don't add more, more descriptions, more explanations, more reassurance, the story won't feel like enough. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stop. Let the line stand. Let the moment breathe. Let the reader meet you halfway in life. I've never spoken just to fill space. And in my writing, I don't either. Because attention is sacred. At least that's something that my inner monologue tells me. So, like, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and listen to your inner monologue. RV out. Yeah, like, because attention is sacred. Time is sacred. And when someone chooses to sit with your story, they deserve intention. So when I say I don't waste words, it's not about minimalism. Clearly. It's about listening. Listening to the rhythm of a scene. Listening to the weight of a sentence. Listening to that quiet inner monologue that tells you when something is enough. And enough when it is honest. It's powerful. Anyways, thank you for checking in on the inner monologue today. Subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and I will catch you next time. RV out. Yeah, baby.